Imagine this. You've saved for years, planned every detail, and finally begun building something you've dreamed of for ages, only to have a neighbor slam the brakes on your happiness. That's exactly what happened when I started constructing my garage, until the permit office gave Karen an answer she never expected. The story began on a crisp Saturday morning. For months I had been working on blueprints for a detached garage beside my home. This wasn't just any garage, it was my sanctuary in progress. A place for tools, projects, and yes, even space for restoring the old pickup that had been sitting under a tarp for far too long. I had checked the local zoning codes, submitted my paperwork, and proudly received an officially approved permit. Construction day finally arrived. The crew poured concrete, trucks rumbled, and the foundation of my dream started coming to life. That's when she appeared. Karen. My across-the-street neighbor with a knack for turning the simplest situations into neighborhood scandals. At first, she just stood there, arms folded, glaring at the workers. Her presence was heavy, like a storm brewing. Then came the shouting. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? You can't build that here." I calmly explained that everything was legal, that I had permits, and even offered to show her the paperwork. But Karen didn't want facts. She wanted control. She called the city hotline right there in front of everyone, reporting me for illegal construction. The workers paused, unsure if they should continue. My stomach dropped. I had visions of fines, stop work orders, and endless delays. Karen smirked like she had already won, pulling out her phone to snap pictures as if documenting a crime scene. By the next morning, an inspector from the permit office arrived. Karen was practically glowing with excitement, convinced she had ended my project before it even began. She paraded around, pointing, whispering to nearby neighbors that I'd tried to sneak something past the city. The inspector walked the site, clipboard in hand, quietly taking notes. Karen stood behind him, grinning ear to ear, waiting for the hammer to fall. I braced myself. This was it. My garage dream was about to die in paperwork. But then the inspector looked up, smiled slightly, and said words Karen never thought she'd hear. "Everything checks out. This garage is fully approved by us." Karen's jaw nearly hit the sidewalk. Karen didn't take the inspector's words lightly. In fact, the moment he confirmed that my garage was fully approved, her entire demeanor changed. She went from smug to furious in seconds. Her face flushed red as if someone had yanked away her crown of neighborhood authority. "You've got to be kidding me," she snapped at the inspector. "This thing is a monstrosity. It's going to ruin property values. I demand you stop construction until there's a hearing." The inspector remained calm, flipping through his notes. "Ma'am, the homeowner followed all procedures, submitted proper documents, and received approval. There's nothing here that violates code. This garage is perfectly legal." Karen's eyes darted to me like daggers. "We'll see about that," she hissed before storming off. At first I thought that was the end of it. The crew picked up their tools and got back to work. The walls started going up, and with each passing day, the garage began to take shape. I felt proud, but I also knew Karen well enough to realize she wasn't done. She thrived on conflict, and I was now her new obsession. A few days later, I noticed her pacing the edge of her lawn with her phone glued to her ear. She wasn't just calling friends, she was calling everyone. By that evening, rumors were circulating around the neighborhood. One neighbor cautiously asked me if it was true. I was building a workshop to run a noisy business. Another wondered if I was turning my garage into a rental space. Karen had gone full campaign mode. She spread stories, twisted facts, and painted me as the villain. I even overheard her telling someone that the city made a mistake. Approving this, it'll be corrected soon. But she didn't stop at gossip. One morning, I stepped outside to find an envelope tucked under my doormat. It wasn't a friendly note. It was a petition, signed by a handful of neighbors. Karen had convinced that demanded the permit office revoke my approval. I stared at the signatures in disbelief. A garage I had legally earned the right to build was suddenly a neighborhood battleground. Instead of panicking, I gathered every document I had, from permits to zoning maps. I knew the truth was on my side, but I also knew Karen was gearing up for her biggest move yet, taking this battle directly to City Hall. The question was, would the permit office stand firm, or would Karen's persistence crack the system? Karen wasn't content with whispers, petitions, or threats. No, she wanted a stage, and City Hall gave her exactly that. Within a week, I received a notice. A formal review of my garage permit had been scheduled due to community concerns. It was obvious who triggered it. Karen had gone all in, determined to crush my dream project under the weight of bureaucracy. The day of the hearing, I arrived early with a folder stuffed full of documents, permit approvals, emails, zoning codes, even receipts. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Still, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. Then Karen arrived. She walked into that hearing room as if she owned the building, dragging along 2 neighbors she had convinced to join her crusade. She carried her own binder, stuffed so full it looked like it might burst, and she wore a grin like she had already won. The officials called the case. Karen wasted no time. She launched into a speech filled with exaggerated claims. This garage will tower over the neighborhood. It'll be used for noisy machinery. It doesn't fit the character of our community. Property values will plummet. It's unfair to all of us. She waved photos she had taken, carefully angled to make the structure look larger than it really was. She even suggested I had misled the city with my application. Her delivery was polished, emotional, and aimed to spark outrage. When it was my turn, I stood, heart pounding, but voice steady. I laid out the facts. My permit had been reviewed and approved. The structure met every zoning requirement. The design matched the style and height restrictions of the neighborhood. Then I pulled out the clincher. Signed. Letters from 2 other neighbors who actually supported the project. People Karen had conveniently ignored in her petition. For a moment, the room was silent. The officials flipped through my paperwork, nodding occasionally. Karen tapped her foot impatiently, arms crossed, certain they'd side with her. Finally, the head of the permit office spoke. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, we find no violations. The permit stands as issued. Karen shot out of her chair. You can't be serious. This is outrageous. You're ignoring the community's voice. But the official held firm. Ma'am, this homeowner followed the law. The approval remains valid. Case closed. Karen's face turned crimson. She grabbed her binder, muttering threats under her breath as she stormed out. But even as the decision went my way, I had a sinking feeling. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. After City Hall shut her down, most people would have accepted the decision. But Karen, she treated it like a personal declaration of war. Losing publicly only fueled her determination to win privately. The very next morning, I woke to the sound of pounding on my door. I opened it to find Karen standing there, phone in hand, filming me. Enjoy your little victory, she sneered. Because I'll make sure this garage never gets finished, she then pointed. Across the street, where her daughter was already snapping photos of my construction site, muttering something about evidence. I closed the door before things escalated further. But I knew this wasn't over. And sure enough, her next tactic was pure sabotage. That afternoon, as the crew worked, Karen called the police. Again. This time, she claimed my builders were trespassing onto her property. 2 officers arrived, looking a bit weary, like they'd been down this road before. They inspected the site, checked the boundary lines, and quickly realized the claim was false. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "this construction is entirely within legal boundaries. The permit has been verified. You need to stop making false reports." Karen's jaw dropped. She tried arguing, but the officers didn't budge. One even warned her that repeated false calls could lead to fines. For once, Karen was the one on the defensive. Still, she wasn't done scheming. Her final attempt was, perhaps the pettiest yet. She began parking her car directly, across from my driveway, blocking trucks from backing in. She'd sit there in her driver's seat, arms crossed, glaring at everyone. But when I called the city about it, officials quickly reminded her that obstructing construction vehicles was also against regulations. Slowly but surely, Karen's campaign unraveled. Neighbors grew tired of her antics, especially after realizing the garage wasn't the giant factory she had warned them about. By the time the final panel went up and the garage doors were installed, several neighbors even stopped by to compliment the build. One man joked, "Looks like Karen lost this battle, huh?" The day construction wrapped, I stood proudly in front of my completed garage. For me, it was more than just a building. It was proof that persistence and the truth could outlast noise and drama. Karen, of course, never congratulated me. Instead, she avoided eye contact whenever she passed by, clearly bitter that her complaints had ended with the city siding against her. But the best part, that garage is still standing strong today. A daily reminder that sometimes the simplest words, "approved by us," are all it takes to silence a Karen. Enjoying this wild ride with Karen and the Garage Saga? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more neighborhood stories with unexpected twists. And if you've ever had a run-in with a nosy neighbor, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how it turned out.